The Clinton River played a pivotal role in the early settlement of southeast Michigan. However, increased population brought about a degradation of the waterway. In the 1940s through the 1960s, population boom and industry growth along the river led to environmental problems and seriously affected the quality of water in the Clinton River. In 1954, after large amounts of rain and flooding, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers built a spillway to alleviate flood flows directly into Lake St. Clair, avoiding Mount Clemens. In the 60s, the Michigan Department of Natural Resources conducted a fish survey that found no living fish from Lake St. Clair to the city of Pontiac. In 1969, the Clinton River Cleanup Committee and the Sterling Heights Rotary Club organized 2,000 volunteers in a cleanup of the Clinton River. 12,000 tons of debris was pulled out of the river. 1972 brought an update to the Federal Water Pollution Control Act of 1948. On a national and local scale, water quality became a priority, and improvements began to be seen. Today, the Clinton River supports an urban steelhead fishery, Paint Creek is an urban trout fishery, and Lake St. Clair is a world-renowned sport fishery. In all, the Clinton River watershed drains 760 square miles of land in southeast Michigan. This area includes 50% of Oakland County, about 95% of Macomb County, with small areas of both Lapeer and St. Clair counties. Like many urbanized watersheds, the Clinton River, its tributaries, and the land that drains into them have been drastically changed over the years to allow for development and industry. In fact, the Clinton River drains one of the most densely populated watersheds in the state, with over 1.5 million people living within the drainage area. In 1987, the entire Clinton River watershed was designated as an area of concern under the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. Since then, more than $43 million has been invested throughout the Clinton River watershed in pursuit of delisting as an area of concern. Through the Area of Concern program, 8 issues were identified in the watershed. These issues are termed beneficial use impairments. To address these impairments, a group of highly active and dedicated stakeholders assembled in 1989 and formed the Clinton River Public Advisory Council. The Public Advisory Council, along with support from many local, state, and federal agencies, put together a list of projects to address the impairments. This list was eventually narrowed down to 11 large-scale habitat restoration projects that would later receive funding for implementation through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. This investment totaled over $20 million. Projects ranging from green stormwater infrastructure to bank stabilization along the river have all been completed in an effort to increase the ecological integrity of the system. Work continues to this day in the watershed as the Public Advisory Council and the Clinton River Watershed Council continue to restore and enhance the Clinton River, its tributaries, and its watershed.
So rivers and streams are defined by 3 main areas: the physical, the chemical, and the biological. The physical aspects of a river are defined by the natural flow regime and the natural sediment regime. So how much water is entering the system, how the river moves that water, and also how much sediment is entering the system and how much sediment the river can move. Sediment naturally moves throughout a river system through erosion and deposition. And through that erosion and deposition, different habitats are created within the river. Those habitats are important for the biology of the system. Different macroinvertebrates and different fish will inhabit different habitats within the system. The final component is the water chemistry. Think about this as what the water quality is. How much dissolved oxygen is in the system? How many pollutants are moving downstream? All three of these components come together and determine how the ecosystem functions as a whole. River ecosystems have many different kinds of habitats. Habitats within the channel help to determine what kind of organisms can be found in that river and what kind of ecosystem processes take place. Habitats such as a very shallow, fast-moving area, also known as a riffle, or habitats that are deeper with slower moving water, known as a pool. Macroinvertebrates and fish will use these different kinds of habitats throughout their life stages. Some of the most common river restoration techniques include bank stabilization, fish passage improvements, and habitat enhancements. Each one of these areas can be achieved using different techniques out in the field. Bank stabilization, one of the most common ways we address that issue or address the erosion that leads to that issue is by using native vegetation. Here in Michigan, our native vegetation has a very deep root structure, meaning that those roots will help to stabilize the sediments on the banks of the river. This reduces the amount of sediment getting in the system. Another thing that we can do on the banks is to increase the floodplain connectivity. This allows the river during high flows to get out onto the floodplain and dissipate energy, helping to reduce erosion downstream. Fish passage connectivity is another very important component of a river ecosystem. By widening out culverts and widening out our bridges to allow fish to move upstream, we're enhancing the ecosystem processes that happen upstream, and we're enhancing fish habitat. In-stream habitat is very important for fish, macroinvertebrates, and all the organisms of the ecosystem. In-stream habitat can be enhanced by creating riffle structures and adding in-stream structures that help fish to move throughout the system. We can also help to reduce pressure on the banks and reduce the amount of erosion that's happening by using rock vein structures or log vein structures that help to redirect flows back into the middle of the channel. All of these techniques put together can make restoration effective, but it takes time for these restoration activities to be reflected in the biology and in the water quality of the system. All of this restoration work in the watershed will have a positive impact on our ecosystem for years to come. And as we continue to monitor these projects and collect the ecological data that's associated with river restoration, we hope to see an increase in our macroinvertebrate population, which will be a great indicator that these projects have been a success. For now, we've created this new habitat for our macroinvertebrates and all of our native organisms, like our fish, our waterfowl, our wading birds, and even our amphibians to enjoy. So it is the hope of the Clinton River Public Advisory Committee that this investment will have dividends for our native organisms and our natural ecosystem for centuries in the future. All of these restoration projects, now that they're completed, will be monitored well into the future. We will collect ecological data to help inform us how successful these projects have been. Some of the other restoration that's taken place throughout the watershed includes green stormwater infrastructure. These projects help to capture stormwater and filter it through the groundwater before it enters into the river system. These projects will help to enhance our water quality for the organisms that live within the Clinton River and its tributaries.
My name is Ann Vara. I'm the Chief Deputy Water Resource Commissioner for Oakland County, and I'm also the former Executive Director of the Clinton River Watershed Council.
Hi, I'm Jeff Bednar. I'm Macomb County's Environmental Resources Manager.
Michigan overall has an abundance of water, so many times our folks in Michigan aren't necessarily paying attention to water because we have so much of it. We don't experience the droughts that other places do. And specifically in Southeast Michigan, it's a very urbanized environment overall. There are some areas of rural natural resources, but overall, a lot of Southeast Michigan has been disturbed or considered a disturbed environment in an urban environment. So for that reason, water resources are very, very important to preserve and improve, to sustain the wildlife and the aquatic wildlife and the availability of outdoor recreation for people that live, work, and play here.
We're a Great Lakes state, And here in Southeast Michigan, water resources were used initially to create the environment that we have. The businesses that thrived here thrived because of the vast supply of water that we had in the area. That need changed over time as we developed other methods to power our industries, and our water resources became sort of abandoned or forgotten for a long period of time. We neglected the natural environment. We saw a degradation of everything around us, and really the quality of life in Southeast Michigan declined. When I started in this business over 20 years ago, I remember an employee with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources talking about Southeast Michigan, and in her opinion, Southeast Michigan was just a wasteland. And just think what we've done to change that since those 20 years is really remarkable.
Ecological restoration is critical to the well-being of the residents and even non-residents of the Clinton River watershed. It's been proven time and time again that people perform better and behave better and feel better when they're outdoors in a green space, whether it's a picnic, on a playground with the family, kayaking, cycling, running, just being outdoors. You'll never find somebody putting a picnic blanket down in a concrete area. Ecological restoration and also actually preserving that restoration is very, very critical to make sure we preserve that green space and even grow it.
We look for ways to differentiate ourselves from other communities, other areas, not only within the state, but within the country. And our water resources, this treasure that we have, the Clinton River, Lake St. Clair, really do differentiate us. But they need to be stewarded. They need to be improved so that people really awake to this wonder of nature that's around them. And that would all be impossible if we didn't have restoration activities in the watershed. Probably the biggest challenge that's faced when managing a watershed is managing expectations. You know, we have such a diverse group of users within the watershed who all have their own particular needs that they want to see fulfilled on the land that they're using. Whether that's the developer who's going to build another 100 lots, or that's the paddle enthusiast who wants to paddle down a clean river without dragging bottom, or it's the fisherman who's looking for the next big catch of the day. We need to manage all those expectations while also providing clean, safe water for everyone to enjoy.
I think the biggest impact of the Clinton River Pack, well, the challenge is obviously delisting the area of concern, but having this citizen group come together with local officials for one goal, and that's for the delisting. I think just to publicize the fact that there is an area of concern and that this is very important to the Great Lakes is huge. It's a big deal. And the more light we can shine on that, the better.
The biggest impact of the Clinton River Pack has been just consistency, to be there for everybody within this watershed. We have over 700 square miles of area and interests in many, many different communities that needed to come together to build consensus over what our needs were, what our restoration targets were, and how we were going to work together to achieve those goals.
Oakland County has been and will continue to work on green infrastructure, and we also refer to as innovative stormwater management techniques, because it's not all green. It can be a mix of gray and green, whatever it takes to achieve the goal of reducing overland water flow in areas that shouldn't be. We are working with George W. Coon Drainage District, which is about 14 communities. We have communities like Royal Oak, Ferndale, Pleasant Ridge, and Berkeley that have already installed green infrastructure and other techniques in their communities, and every little bit helps. We're also working with other areas outside the drainage districts, and we also install green infrastructure on our own properties, WRC-owned properties, as well as Oakland County public spaces.
We look at the river in a whole new way, and we manage stormwater in a whole new way. Instead of just looking at the river as an outlet for that industry or that latest commercial project, we now look at it as a resource to enjoy. We see paddlers on the river in multiple locations that are out not only recreating, but also stewarding and helping to manage that river. They'll go out and they'll clear it of unnecessary debris so that the river's free flowing. We have fishing enthusiasts who are out every night. We have fishermen on the fishing pier here at the Clinton River Spillway to socialize. They have a good time and they catch a lot of fish. There are a multitude of projects that we have in the hopper here in Macomb County to improve green infrastructure and expand our habitat restoration efforts. We're finishing up on a project where we built 2 miles of bioretention within the Sterling Relief Drain in Sterling Heights. It drains about 20% of Sterling Heights, and flow that used to just go out unabated, untreated, into the Red Run and into the Clinton River, now is managed through these bioretention cells to improve water quality, capture pollutants, and control sediment loss. We have projects that we're working on with the Detroit Zoological Society. We're going to be planting over 50 trees here at the end of the Spillway in Harrison Township. We've all seen the buy-in that ecological restoration has generated, the excitement for our water resources within our communities. The public wants it, the businesses want it, and we're happy to help lead that charge.
My name is Jen Tewksbury. I'm the Area of Concern Coordinator for the Clinton River Area of Concern, and I work for the state of Michigan through the Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. The Area of Concern program has been around since the late 1980s. We kind of call that the dark period sometimes because there wasn't a lot of funding for the program, so we did a lot of planning and assessments to see what we thought the Area of Concern would need if funding did come. And when the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative came about 10 years ago, we were able to look at those plans and those assessments and prioritize projects. And so to this point, over the last 10 years, about $40 million has been invested in the Area of Concern. And we anticipate another 6 to 12 over the next year or so for some sediment cleanups in the lower Clinton River. So a very significant amount of funding for this area for sure. So coordination has been the backbone of the success of the restoration of this AOC. You know, having coordination between the federal, the state, and the local partners is key, especially when you have these large-scale remediation and restoration projects. In fact, you know, there's so many partners, sometimes we joke that we have to have more room on our public outreach materials for all the logos of everyone involved because there is so much coordination. So it's key with a large watershed like this. So the next steps for the Clinton River Area of Concern will be removing the remaining beneficial use impairments. We have removed 1, we have 7 remaining. Well, we have completed most of the on-the-ground work. So now we are going to be working with the PAC to assess those different beneficial use impairments, along with some of our technical staff, our fisheries biologists, folks like that, and go ahead and start that process of removing those beneficial use impairments. Then once we remove those, we'll be on our road to delisting. So the Public Advisory Council has played a key role in the success of the restoration of this area of concern. They've been a great partner. They've worked with the federal and state entities to get this work going to help us identify projects. And they've also provided a lot of good public outreach so that people know what we're doing and why we're doing it and what the area of concern really is. And they've made my job easier so I can go to EPA and champion for funding for these projects. They're a well-organized Public Advisory Council, and that really goes a long way in getting that funding for these projects.